The world of music stands frozen in grief and disbelief as Ozzy Osbourne, who was 76, takes his final bow on July 22, 2025. The Prince of Darkness passed away after a long and grueling battle with Parkinson's disease and years of devastating health setbacks. One of his most haunting confessions now echoes like a prophecy fulfilled. In the echo he leaves
behind,
the past
4 years have been sheer hell for me.
Hangs like a
My
bell
health
tolling
has been in a
exactly
terrible
on time.
state.
The last
This
4
wasn't
years
just a
had
rock
been
legend.
gauntlet.
This was
His
a man
health
who
a
had
ruin,
stared
he dragged
into the
across.
abyss again and again
This wasn't
and kept
only a
walking.
titan of sound.
A man whose every
This
breath
was a
was
man who
defiance
peered
in the
into
face of
voids
pain.
that would swallow most
Parkinson's
and kept
disease
walking.
didn't just weaken him.
Parkinson's
It stole the
didn't
power
simply
from his
burden
legs.
him.
A horrific
It robbed
fall
his
shattered
legs,
his spine,
turned steps
leaving
into
him
tests,
gasping through
turned
surgeries and
balance
silence.
into a wager.
And now,
A
as the
catastrophic
world
fall
mourns,
wrecked his spine.
it's clear that fate has delivered its
Surgeries
final and
stitched him
most
back.
vicious strike.
Silence answered the rest.
Behind the shadow of the Prince
Now
of
the
Darkness
mourning is
lay a
loud
soul
and unrelenting,
gasping for peace.
because fate
A
has
warrior
played its
worn
final,
down by
vicious
endless
chord.
war.
Behind
What
the
happened to
mask,
Ozzy
the world
Osbourne
loved a
is not
demon
just
grin,
another chapter in
a
a tragic
glare
life.
under stage
It's a
heat.
revelation so
There was
painful,
a human being
so
desperate for
heart-wrenching.
quiet.
It will leave
A
you
fighter
shaken
eroded by
long
years
after
of
the
fighting.
final note fades.
What happened to Ozzy
Before we
is
dive
not
in,
a tidy
hit
chapter
like
in a
as a
messy
simple
life.
gesture of respect
It is a
for a
revelation
legend
that
who
hurts,
gave the world everything
a truth
he
that
had,
lingers long
and
after
now
the last feedback
leaves behind
fades.
a silence more
Comment
powerful
76
than any scream.
or write rip Ozzy Osbourne
Before
to
the
honor
roaring
them.
crowds,
Before
the
roaring
blazing
crowds learned
lights,
his name.
before the legend of the
Before
Prince of Darkness was
pyrotechnics
etched
turned
into
night
music
into
history,
day.
there
Before
was only
legends carried a
silence.
crown with horns.
A silence so heavy
There was a hush
it threatened
so
to
heavy
crush the
it
soul of a
nearly
boy
crushed a
who didn't
child.
grow up to dream.
In the stained
He
streets
grew up
of
to
Aston,
survive.
Birmingham.
In the
A
soot-stained
boy
slums
named
of
John
Aston,
Michael
Birmingham,
Osbourne, born
a young
in
John Michael
1948,
Osbourne,
grew
born
up
in
cramped
1948,
rooms where
lived
cold
in a
lived
cramped,
permanently,
cold
and
home
6 children,
with 6 children and 2
stretched the
parents
heat of
who were
2
too
exhausted
exhausted
parents.
to nurture.
His
father,
came home
worn thin by
from
factory
the
labor,
factory,
believed
convinced
emotion was
tenderness
weakness.
was a weakness the
His
world
mother,
punished.
hardened by endless
His
hours on
mother,
the assembly
emptied
line,
by assembly
rarely
lines,
had the energy to
had
offer
little
softness.
left at the
Ozzy,
end of the shift.
as the world would later know him,
The boy who
was
would
not
become
the clever
Ozzy
one,
wasn't
not
the
the
prodigy
charming one.
or the charmer.
He was the overlooked one,
He was the one
the
the
child
room
who blended
forgot,
into the wallpaper of
wallpapered
poverty.
into poverty.
At school, he found no
was
refuge.
no rescue.
The letters taunted
Letters
him,
turned into
numbers
taunts,
blurred and danced.
numbers into taunting
Dyslexia
shapes
wasn't understood
that
in the
flipped and
1950s.
swam.
It was mistaken for
Dyslexia wasn't
stupidity.
a word that
Teachers
held
dismissed him
compassion.
as hopeless, and
It was a
classmates mocked him
misunderstanding
with
that
cruel
drew
delight.
laughter.
The bullying
Teachers
wasn't just
shrugged
names
him off.
shouted across playgrounds.
Classmates
It was
sharpened
fists
cruelty
in the hallway,
like a hobby.
knees to the stomach,
The insults
bloodied
were not
lips
just
behind
shouted.
buildings,
They
and
were
no
fists,
adult ever
knees,
asked why.
pavement, and blood.
At home, there was no
no
escape.
one asked why.
Once, after
Home
coming home in
offered no
tears,
shelter.
his father beat
Once,
him with a belt.
coming back in
Not
tears,
because he was
he
weak,
met a belt
but because
instead of
weakness
comfort.
wasn't tolerated.
Not because he had
Pain
done wrong,
didn't get you
but
sympathy.
because weakness
Ozzy
had
would
no
later
place
recall,
at the table.
it got you punishment.
He learned silence
And so,
like a second
the
skin,
silence around
but
him grew
armor
louder.
like that doesn't
He learned
heal.
to wear it like armor.
It only hides
But
wounds.
armor doesn't heal.
Comment
By the time he
76,
turned
or
14
write
in
Rip
1962,
Ozzy Osbourne to honor
that
them.
silence had
By
become
14,
unbearable.
the silence had
In a
become
tiny,
a black
dimly lit
tide.
bedroom, he
In
tied a
small,
rope using
dim
his
room,
mother's
he
washing
knotted
line,
a washing line,
climbed onto a
climbed
chair,
a chair,
and waited
and
for
waited
the
for the
world to let go of him.
It
Fate
did
intervened, not with
it
mercy,
burst in the form
but with
of his
rage.
father's fury.
His father
pulling
burst
him
in
down,
and yanked him
trading
down,
despair
then beat him
for
again,
violence
as
if
though
pain
violence
could
could
be
beat
beaten
out
like a
despair.
stain.
Something in him
cracked
cracked that day,
or calcified.
or maybe something finally
The
calcified.
boy who kept trying to fit
stopped
into a
trying at
hostile
school,
map of letters
stopped
and faces
speaking
stopped
unless
trying
required.
at all.
He drifted through adolescence
days
with the blank
with the
stare of someone already halfway gone. The sound of laughter
was a
became
language
foreign.
he no longer understood.
The mirror showed a boy
The
already
mirror
fading.
reported a fading outline.
At 15,
a boy
he dropped out with
evaporating.
no qualifications,
At 15,
no purpose,
he
and
left
no
school
plan.
without
He
qualifications.
worked where he could,
without
at a
a map,
slaughterhouse, on
without a
construction
promise.
sites, in factories
He
tuning
found
car
work
horns,
where work would
but he
have
was
him.
too distracted,
A
too
slaughterhouse.
awkward,
too broken for any of it to last. Each job ended the same.
He couldn't
Fired,
stay.
forgotten, alone.
He was too distracted,
By 17,
too scarred,
hunger
too
gnawed at
unmoored
him.
each job,
Not metaphorical,
the same
but
way.
real,
Fired,
physical hunger.
forgotten, back
His shoes
into the
had
cold.
holes, his shirts hung
Hunger
in threads,
became real,
and his hope was
physical,
a crumpled thing
a
he
set
no
of
longer
teeth,
bothered to
always
hold.
closing.
He was running out of
Shoes
oxygen,
wore holes.
not just in his lungs,
Shirts thinned
but in
to
his life.
threads.
When desperation
Hope wrinkled
hit,
into a
it didn't
scrap,
whisper.
not worth holding.
It screamed.
When
In
desperation
1965,
arrived, it didn't
a botched
knock.
burglary landed him in
kicked in
Winson
the
Green
door.
Prison.
In
Behind those
1965,
walls,
a
reality
botched burglary
hit like
put
iron.
him behind the
In
walls
one
of Winson
terrifying
Green.
encounter,
Steel taught
he
truths
was
quickly.
attacked
An
by
attack
another
came.
inmate, and he fought back
defended
the
himself
only way
with
he
what
knew
he
how,
had.
with a metal
It wasn't
chamber
heroism.
pot. It wasn't bravery.
It was survival.
It was survival.
Then,
But
from
even
a
in that
radio's
darkness,
thin speaker,
a spark
a
refused
burst of
to die.
impossible light. The
One
Beatles
afternoon,
singing, "She
the
Loves
Beatles,
You."
"She Loves
The
You,"
little speaker
crackled
might as
through a
well
prison
have
radio.
been splitting the sky.
Something ignited.
He didn't know
For the first
chords
time,
or keys.
Ozzy didn't want
only
to disappear.
that he needed to be
He
heard.
wanted to be seen,
Needed to shout
heard,
over the darkness
to
that
live
had
out
crawled
loud.
into his bones.
That moment
Right
changed
there,
me.
in the
He would
place
later
built
say,
to quiet him.
I didn't
he
know
felt
how to play
something
anything,
flare.
but I
He
knew I
wouldn't
needed to be
die
on stage.
anonymous.
I needed to
He would be
scream
loud
louder than
enough
the
to
pain
be
inside
impossible
me.
to ignore.
That scream
Comment
became his salvation.
76, or right
Not
rip
success,
Ozzy
not
Osbourne
yet,
to honor them.
but a reason
Fresh
to keep
out of
going.
the cell in
In that moment,
1965,
in that prison,
17
the boy
and
who had once
uncertain,
begged the world to
he
let him
wasn't
go
in
made a
search of
vow.
redemption.
He would not
Just
die
a way to
forgotten
stay
in
visible
Birmingham.
to himself.
He would be loud.
The
He would be
sentence for
terrifying.
robbing a
He
clothing
would
shop
be
wasn't a
unforgettable.
lesson.
And from
It
that
was a
decision,
stamp the
a
world
legend
held
began to
against his
rise.
name.
Not from peace
He
or
stepped
privilege,
into daylight,
but from the
not
ashes of
reformed,
despair,
only
where pain
rearranged.
forged
The
a voice
fracture
that
lines
would one
showing.
day shake the world.
Then, a different kind of
The
miracle.
shadows of his troubled
A
youth
song
had barely
became a
begun to
plan.
lift when something
He didn't know
extraordinary
technique.
pierced through the
He
silence of
only
despair.
knew he had to turn
A
the
sound,
scream inside
a calling
into
that would
sound.
anchor his soul for
The rope
decades
he
to
once
come.
tied in a quiet bedroom
Ozzy
gave way to a
Osbourne,
vow
newly
to live
released
out
from
loud.
Winson Green Prison
By
in
1968,
1965 at just
an ad
17,
for a vocalist
wasn't
led him
searching
to a
for
shabby
redemption.
room in Birmingham
He was
that
simply
smelled of
drifting through a
dust
world
and
that had already
electricity.
decided he wouldn't
There
matter.
he met fellow haunted
His 6-week
men,
sentence
a
for robbing a
guitarist
clothing
who
store,
had taught his hands
a desperate
to sing
act
even
of
after
survival
fingertips
more than
went
crime,
missing.
hadn't taught him
A
any
bassist
lessons,
whose obsessions
only
shaped
confirmed
the
his
atmosphere.
worthlessness in the
A
eyes of
drummer
society.
who played like thunder
He
locked
walked
in a
out of
human
that
body.
cell not reformed,
They called themselves
but more
Earth
fractured than ever.
at first.
And then
Then
a
a
miracle
cinema
came
marquee
not in the form
offered
of
a
a
sign,
savior,
Black
but a
Sabbath.
song.
If
When he
people
heard the
paid
Beatles'
to be
"She
scared,
Loves You"
they
crackle
thought,
through a
why
cheap
not
radio
give them
speaker,
music that took
it
fear
was as if the
seriously
world
and
cracked
turned
open.
it into art.
It was like hearing
weren't
God
seeking
speak to me
fame.
through music.
They were trying
He
to
later remembered,
exercise something
his voice
ugly
distant,
and unnamed.
almost tearful.
The
That
songs
moment
felt
didn't erase
less
the
like
bruises on his back
entertainment
or the
and
fear
more
in his
like
bones,
rituals.
but it gave him a
On
vision.
Friday the 13th
He didn't
of
know
February
how, but he knew.
1970,
He
they
had to
released a
make
record
music,
that sounded like
not
weather
polished
turning.
music,
The
not
date
perfect
felt like a
music,
dare.
but music that
Critics
screamed,
recoiled, called
that
it
screamed
unsayable
louder than
things.
the pain he had carried for
But
so
the young
long.
and the wounded
That
leaned
screamed
close
louder
and
than the
recognized
silence of his
themselves.
childhood.
In
That
that
screamed
sound,
louder than the
someone was
darkness he
finally
almost gave
asking
into.
how they were
In a
by
tiny,
screaming
dimly
it
lit
to the
bedroom,
ceiling.
he tied a rope using
Comment
his mother's
76,
washing line,
or right
climbed
rip
onto a
Ozzy
chair,
Osbourne to
and
honor
waited for the
them.
world
That
to let
same
go of
year,
him.
a
And
second
now,
record arrived,
just 2 years later,
written
he
in
was
a rush,
hearing a reason not
carrying
to.
its own
By
prophecy.
1968, that scream
Paranoid
had
didn't
found its
feel
echo.
manufactured.
A modest newspaper
felt
ad seeking a
discovered.
vocalist led
War
him to a
Pigs,
rundown
Iron
rehearsal
Man,
room in
and
Birmingham,
the title track
where he
weren't
met
just
3
songs.
other haunted men.
They were
Tony
coordinates
Iommi,
for
a
people who had been
guitarist whose
traveling
missing
without a
fingertips
map.
couldn't blunt the fury
Ozzy's
in his
voice
riffs.
wasn't refined so
Geezer
much
Butler,
as Renas
a bassist
in the way
whose
bruises
fascination
are
with the
honest.
occult gave
He
their
hadn't
sound its
memorized
unease.
theory.
And Bill
He
Ward,
didn't need to.
a drummer who played like
Pain
thunder
became
trapped
melody.
in human skin.
History
They called
became
themselves Earth
percussion.
at first, but a
Stubborn
chance
will
encounter
became
with
the
a horror
amplifier.
film marquee, Black
Behind
Sabbath,
every stunt
sparked
and snarl,
something more than a
the
name.
quiet boy from
It
Aston
became a
remained
purpose.
the kid they called
If
slow.
People pay to be scared,
The kid who was told
Ozzy would
he
later
was
say.
invisible.
Why not
Now
give them
he
music
howled
that
that
terrifies
invisibility
and moves
into
them?
dust.
They weren't trying to be famous. They were trying to survive, trying to purge something ugly and unspoken.
He poured
Their songs
himself into
weren't
the shape
entertainment.
heavy metal required,
They were
and
exorcisms.
called the wound a
They were
stage.
agony set to
Albums
distortion.
multiplied.
They were grief turned into
Audiences
guitars. On Friday,
Spotlights
February
tried and
13,
failed to reach the
1970,
spaces
they
inside
released
him
their
where the
self-titled
old hurt
debut
still
album.
spoke.
The date alone,
The world
dark,
said legend,
ominous,
and part
almost
of him
cursed,
still felt like a
fate.
runaway looking for
Critics
a place
recoiled.
to stop running.
They called it satanic,
But legends grow
disgusting,
on their own.
unlistenable.
Myth
But the
gathered
youth,
around the
the
name,
broken,
built
the lonely,
from riffs and riffs,
they listened.
built from
and
the
they
sight
felt
of a man
seen.
who refused to
In a
disappear.
world where no one asked them how they were
Comment
doing,
76,
Ozzy screamed
or
it
right
for
rip,
them.
Ozzy.
That same
Osbourne
year,
to
their
honor
second
them.
album,
By the
Paranoid, was written in a
mid-70s,
rush,
he stood on
almost
the
by
mountaintop
accident.
of a sound
Yet,
he had
it
helped
became
will into
gospel.
being. But
War,
even mountains
pigs,
are weathered by
Iron
storms
Man,
you cannot
and the
see.
haunting title track
The
weren't
habits
just
sharpened
tracks.
by pain
They were
had learned to
lifelines.
sharpen him back.
Ozzy's voice wasn't classically
record after
trained.
record raised
It wasn't
the
even
band's
properly
flag
tuned,
higher.
but it was real.
Inside, the
It was
emptiness
raw.
took more territory.
It was the voice of someone who had
Missed
clawed his way
rehearsals,
back from the edge
frayed
and now
patience,
dared the world
rooms
to
that
push
used
him
to
again.
feel like brotherhood, now
I
clenched
didn't know
into
what I was doing,
disappointment.
he admitted later.
The air between
I knew it had
longtime
to be loud.
comrades went cold.
That loudness wasn't
In
just volume.
1979, the
It was
call
vengeance.
came like a door closing
It was a
in
scream
the middle
that
of
said,
the night.
I survived.
He was out removed
and I will
from
not
the
be
one
quiet.
sanctuary that
He never
made
learned to
chaos
read
make
music.
sense.
Never took a lesson.
It wasn't just
but
a
he didn't
job.
need to.
It was
Because
a
his
world.
pain was the melody.
Exile
His
felt
wounds
like
were the lyrics.
falling,
His
but
past
slower.
was the percussion.
He disappeared
his
to a
soul,
Los Angeles hotel
that
room
was the
that became an
amplifier.
island.
Behind the madman
Curtains
persona,
closed.
behind the
Time
wild
lost
antics
shape.
and stage
He
theatrics,
tried to
there
numb
still
himself
lived the
enough
boy
to be
from Aston,
nobody and
the boy who
nearly
was told he
succeeded.
was stupid.
But the
worthless,
gravity of certain
invisible.
people can pull wreckage
That boy
back together.
was still screaming.
A woman
But now,
stepped through the smoke
world was
and
listening.
insisted there was
The
still
early
a
years
spark.
of Black Sabbath weren't just
Sharon
about
saw what
pioneering a
others could
genre.
not. That
They
the
were
magic
about
the band
reclaiming
wore on
life.
stage had always
Ozzy
been
didn't
beating
build
inside
heavy metal.
him.
He bled it into
Comment
existence.
76.
Every
or right
concert,
rip Ozzy
every
Osbourne
growl,
to honor
every
them.
riff was
The
a rebellion
guitarist
against a fate
arrived
he
like
was
a
supposed to
sunrise
accept.
with discipline
And even
for
as
daylight
fame came
and a
crashing
heart
in,
tuned to fire.
crowds roaring,
Randy
records
Rhoads
selling,
didn't just play.
headlines blazing,
He spoke a
remained
new
haunted.
dialect of electricity.
The louder the applause,
With
the
him,
louder the
the
voices
pieces
inside
began
him
to
screamed.
arrange themselves into
The
songs that
success
felt
never
like
silenced the
resurrections.
It
The
only
record
masked
they
it.
made in 1980
And as the world
was
began
an
to call him a
announcement.
legend,
The
he
fallen
still
had
felt
learned
like
how
a
to
runaway
stand
screaming
again.
into the void.
An anthem
But that
about a
scream
train that
changed the
never
world.
stops became
It
a
built
banner
more than
under
music.
which the wounded
It
could
built
march.
myth. It built memory.
This was not triumph
It built a
for its
legacy
own
forged
sake.
in torment.
It was
and
survival
somehow,
formalized in
resilience.
sound.
By the
The collapse
mid-1970s,
had not been the
Ozzy
end,
Osbourne
but
stood
the
on the
crucible,
summit of heavy metal glory.
revealing the stubbornness
But beneath
that
the
had
roaring
kept the
crowd
boy
and
alive
blinding
when
stage
the world
lights,
labeled him
his soul was
disposable.
quietly crumbling.
The road ahead
The same
would be
voice
jagged
that once
loss and
pierced the
grief,
silence of a
waiting for their
generation
turn,
was
but in
now
this
being
moment,
drowned
the
out by
roar
inner
returned
demons
with purpose.
no spotlight could reach.
He was still here.
Black Sabbath had become a
Comment
global
76,
phenomenon.
or right
Pioneers
rip
of a
Ozzy
sound
Osbourne
that felt
to
like
honor
thunder
them.
and spoke to the outcasts, the broken and the angry.
The bond between
But for
singer
Ozzy,
and guitarist
the louder
was
the
more
music
than
grew,
professional.
the more deafening his
It felt
emptiness
carved
became.
from something older
Behind
than
closed
either of
doors,
them.
he was
Two
unraveling,
temperaments that fit
gripped
like
by a
lock
storm
and
of
key.
destructive habits,
One wild
haunted
and
by
volcanic,
childhood wounds
one
that had
focused
never
and
truly
precise.
healed, and numbed
A
by the
second record
crushing
in
weight of fame.
1981
Album
extended
after
the
album,
statement.
like Paranoid
Not a follow-up,
in 1970
a declaration.
and Sabbath Bloody Sabbath
The
in
man dismissed as
1973,
broken had
elevated
weaponized
the band
his cracks
to iconic
into
status.
skylights.
But Ozzy
On
was
stage,
slipping into
they were
shadows
storm and
even the
star.
stage lights couldn't chase away.
Off stage, they traded
His
thoughts
bandmates
that made
began
midnight
noticing
shorter.
the missed rehearsals,
There was
the
a grace
incoherent
about the young
ramblings,
player that
the
hinted
spark
at
dimming
urgency,
behind his wild
as
eyes.
if he understood without
Tony
knowing
Iommi,
why that
once
every
his brother
note
in
had to
riffs,
matter.
grew cold.
Sometimes
The air between them
before a
thickened
shattering
with
goes
unspoken
still,
blame and exhausted
and those
silence.
who have lived through too
Then,
many
in
earthquakes can feel
1979,
it gathering.
came the final
He
betrayal.
would later admit he
They fired
sensed
him.
the edge coming.
Not face to face.
They were flying high
with
enough
dignity.
to graze fate.
They sent someone else
Comment
to do
76,
it. Ozzy would
or
later
right
recall,
rip Ozzy
with the weight of
Osbourne to honor
abandonment
them.
in his voice,
Mourning,
they
March
didn't even have the
19th,
balls to to tell me themselves. That was my band.
A small plane,
It wasn't just a career
like
shattered,
on a
it was a
day.
sanctuary torn from him.
Who also
Black
knew
Sabbath
how to
was
fly,
more than music
took
to
the
Ozzy.
craft up for
It was
what
the one
felt like
place where
harmless
chaos
arcs
made
on
sense,
the sky.
where his brokenness
Randy
became
climbed
power.
aboard with a makeup
Without
artist,
it, he was
curious,
exiled,
calm.
discarded like
Below,
a warning
a
label.
singer looked up,
He disappeared
hopeful
into a Los
and
Angeles
uneasy
hotel
in a
room,
way he
curtains
wouldn't
drawn,
name.
soul
One pass,
drowning.
then another.
I just sat in that
On
room.
the third,
He would later
a
confess.
wing touched the tour
I numbed
bus.
myself until I couldn't feel
The
anything.
fall was immediate.
I thought I would fade
fire
away
absolute.
in that silence.
25
To the
years
outside
old,
world,
the
he was still
guitarist's light
Ozzy
was
Osbourne.
extinguished in open
But in that
daylight.
room, he was a fading
The singer
echo
ran
of himself.
toward heat that
A
didn't
ghost
care
with
he
a
was
pulse.
famous.
A scream
out a
trapped
name
inside the man
until the
who
name
once
broke,
taught the world how
hours
to
bent.
scream.
Days
But legends
elapsed.
don't vanish. They
Language
transform.
failed.
And in
He said
Ozzy's
later
darkest
that part
hour,
of him ended
something
there,
stirred in
and
the
anyone
ashes.
who heard understood.
Sharon Osbourne,
the
daughter
friend
of
who
Sabbath's
helped
former
rebuild
manager,
the ruins was
saw
gone,
more than a fallen
and the ruin
icon.
tried to rebuild
She
itself.
saw a man not yet
Comment
finished.
25
She
or
pulled
right
him from the
rip
wreckage
Randy Rhoads
and
to
whispered
honor
the
them.
impossible.
Grief doesn't obey.
You were the magic in that
Weeks
band.
passed like a
You can
single
do this
windowless
without
room.
them. Her
The
faith
man
struck
the world
like lightning
called
against wet
indestructible
stone.
vanished into
Then
a hush
came
so
Randy
deep
Rhoads,
it swallowed
young,
appetite,
disciplined,
sleep,
and
speech.
unearthly in his talent.
The anchor
His
of
guitar
his life
didn't just
reached
play,
for him,
it
and
wept,
sometimes
soared,
couldn't touch
and
bottom.
screamed. To
Eventually,
Ozzy, Randy was
the one
not just a
thing that had
bandmate.
ever carried
He was a
him
lifeline.
returned. He
Together,
wrote,
they built Blizzard
not
of
to
Oz,
escape,
released
but
in
to
1980.
remember.
An album
Every
forged
lyric
not in
bent
celebration,
toward the
but in
absence.
survival.
Every howl
Songs like
honored the
Crazy
presence
Train
that would
weren't
not
just
return.
anthems. They were
He kept
resurrections.
going not because
Each lyric,
healing arrived,
each chord,
but
a
because
defiance.
devotion
I am
demanded
still
movement.
here. I still matter.
Every show after
Looking
that
back,
carried a
the
weight
collapse
shared
wasn't the
between
ending.
stage
It
and
was the
sky.
crucible.
was
Ozzy had to
not
be broken
fixed.
beyond recognition
He was
to
alive.
uncover the raw,
Comment
resilient fire
76
inside.
or right rip
And though the
Ozzy.
road ahead would be
Osbourne
marred
to
with
honor
loss,
them.
grief,
You might
and
imagine
battles
that
that would leave
surviving
deeper
the
scars than fame
unimaginable
ever could
teaches
heal.
the soul a
This
way
was
out
the
of
moment
pain.
his spirit roared
That
loudest.
isn't how it works.
In his own words,
The
I was
years
out of
after
control.
The fire blurred into
somehow,
a storm of
I
noise
kept going.
designed to
I
drown
always
out
kept
a
going.
silence that
The
always
bond
rose
between
again.
Ozzy Osbourne and Randy
Tours
Rhoads
became
wasn't merely
battlefields where
musical.
exhaustion
It was
wore
spiritual,
body armor.
salvational,
Hotel
almost
rooms
celestial
became
in
mirrors
nature.
that showed a man
Randy
struggling
didn't
to
just step
recognize
into
himself.
Ozzy's life with a guitar.
Public saw
He
spectacle.
arrived like a light piercing
Private
through a
lived
suffocating
with the fog
storm.
that would not live.
For Ozzy, still reeling
partner
from the
who had once
humiliation of being
rescued him
cast out of Black
refused to
Sabbath
abandon the
and clinging
fight,
to sanity
but
by
love
mere
can only
threads,
carry so
Randy
much
was
weight
proof
at once.
that there could still be
He would
beauty,
later say
discipline,
he felt
and
absent
purpose in
from
a
his
world
own life.
that had grown cruel
By
and
the late
meaningless.
80s, drink
Randy's
had
youth
swallowed
wasn't
days
reckless.
whole.
It was focused.
Pills erased
His creativity
the lines
didn't
between
erupt
memory
in chaos
and
like
dream.
Ozzy's, but
In
instead
August
flowed like fire
1989,
through glass,
collapse
shaped and
manifested
precise.
as danger that tore
Together,
through his home.
they weren't just
and nearly
creating
cost
music.
Him the person who
They
had
were
given
building
him
salvation
everything.
in sound.
He woke
When they
to the
released
reality
Diary of a
actions
Madman
he could
in
barely
1981,
remember, and felt
it wasn't
levied
just
by
a follow-up
shame
album,
that cut deeper
it was a
than any
defiant
headline.
declaration.
He was
Ozzy,
taken not to
once
punishment,
discarded
but
as
to a
damaged
place where
goods,
the damage
now
had
stood
to be
again
named.
as a force reborn.
Alone with
And
silence,
it was Randy
he
who
faced
helped
the
carve
version
that path.
of himself he could no
Ozzy
longer
once
forgive.
said, Randy wasn't just a
counselor
guitar
asked
player.
what he
He
feared
was my
most.
friend, my little
He
brother.
answered without
and the only
hesitation,
reason I didn't
losing
give up.
her.
The connection
didn't
ran
leave.
deeper than melodies.
She showed up
It was the
with
heartbeat
eyes like
that
weapons
sustained
and
Ozzy
said the
through a
spark was
fragile
still
rebirth.
there.
On
wasn't
stage, they
absolution.
were electric.
It was an
Ozzy,
assignment.
raw and unhinged,
He
and
fought
Randy,
daily,
controlled
not for a
and transcendent.
stage, but for
Off
the
stage,
chance to deserve
they were
the
laughter
home
and
he
philosophy,
had nearly destroyed.
late-night talks and mutual
He
respect.
emerged, changed,
Ozzy
not
was in awe,
triumphant,
not just of
cured,
Randy's talent,
but awake.
but of his soul.
Comment
He had this
76,
grace,
or
Ozzy
right
recalled,
rip Ozzy.
like he knew he didn't
Osbourne
have
to honor
forever,
them.
so he made every note
Consciousness
count.
carried him into the 90s.
There was an
with a
unspoken
different kind
urgency
of
to their
power.
collaboration,
With
a shared
guitarist
understanding
whose
that
sound
lightning
felt like
doesn't
steel
strike
and
twice,
wildfire.
and when it does,
He set
You
to work
honor
shaping
it.
songs that sounded
But
less like
storms
conquest
never last.
and more like confession.
And somewhere deep down,
In
the calm before
1991,
devastation,
an album
Ozzy
arrived
would later
that
admit
many
he
took
felt
as a comeback,
that
but was
eerie
really a
stillness
reckoning.
before fate decides to
Titles
be cruel
people
again.
sang along to
They were
doubled as
flying
letters
too high.
he'd written to those he
It wouldn't
loved,
last,
and to the roads
and when
that
it
led
broke,
him away
it wouldn't
and back
crack
again.
gently. It would
Crowds
shatter
heard the
everything.
choruses.
On the morning
Those
of
who
March
were listening
19th,
heard a man trying
1982,
to be human.
the nightmare
Offstage,
Ozzy never saw coming
battle kept
arrived
its
with the
teeth.
silence of a scream
Each concert
trapped in the
counted
throat.
as a win.
While on tour
Each
in
clean
Leesburg,
morning
Florida,
felt like a
the
miracle
band
with
made a
paperwork.
routine stop at a property
The
owned by
marriage
their
that
bus
had
driver.
shaken under the weight
There,
of madness
a small
found
private
new
plane
footing
sat idle,
in perfect
a toy of
enduring.
temptation on a restless
He announced
morning.
a farewell.
The driver,
in
a
1992,
licensed pilot,
then proved
decided to
farewell
take it for a
is
joyride.
complicated word.
Randy Rhoads,
He worked
always
like
curious
stopping
and
would
calm,
dissolve him.
climbed aboard with
The
makeup
hurt
artist
never
Rachel
vanished.
Youngblood.
It
was
learned
meant to
how
be
to live
harmless,
inside a life.
a loop in the sky.
When he
bit
turned
of thrill
toward the
before the next
microphone
long
and
drive.
let out that long,
Ozzy stood
familiar
below,
wail,
watching,
it wasn't for
smiling
show.
faintly,
was
perhaps
how
already
he stayed
haunted by a
alive.
shadow he couldn't
Comment
name.
76.
The plane
or
made
right,
2
rip
passes,
Ozzy Osbourne
but
to
on the
honor
third,
them.
the
A
unthinkable
quieter
happened.
era
A
arrived
wing
with the camera
clipped the
pointed
band's
at
tour
a
bus.
house.
In an instant,
In the early
aircraft
2000s,
spiraled,
a new
plummeted,
generation
and erupted
learned
into
his name,
flames upon
not
impact.
through detuned thunder,
Randy
but through a
Rhoads
dad
was
who
gone,
wandered kitchens
25
and
years
fumbled
old.
remotes.
A comet
A man who
extinguished in
swore
daylight.
at technology and
Ozzy
laughed
ran
at
toward the
himself.
wreckage, screaming
The myth
Randy's name
softened
until his
enough
voice
to show
cracked
the person.
and broke.
He was
The flames
older
weren't
now,
just fire,
carrying decades
they were
of
finality.
impact in his joints
He collapsed
and
beside the
reflexes.
wreck, shaking,
Then December
weeping,
8th,
unable to comprehend
2003,
what lay in front of
the
him.
thread snapped.
For hours,
A
he was
ride on a quad
inconsolable.
bike turned
For days,
violent and
he
cold.
couldn't speak.
Metal
for weeks,
and earth
he lived in a
conspired
blur
to break
of
what
numb
hadn't already
disbelief.
been broken.
I lost a part of
Collarbone,
myself that day,
ribs,
he said
a
later.
vertebra in the neck.
It wasn't just Randy's
lungs that
body in
stopped.
that fire.
Machines
It was my
took
hope,
over breathing.
my music, my
For
reason
8 days,
to keep breathing.
the world held its breath.
The
with
man
him.
who had been pulled
the
from ruin
partner
by
who
a
had
friend
stayed through
was now
everything
dragged
measured
back
love
into
in
darkness
vigil.
by fate.
He emerged.
And this time, the fall
Doctors
felt
spoke in long
bottomless.
timelines,
Even Sharon
but his
couldn't
life
reach
had
him
been
at
built
first.
on ignoring
The
them.
shows were canceled.
Through pain
The
that
laughter
threw
stopped.
sparks under the skin
house
and
went
therapy
quiet.
that turned sweat
It was
into
as if the
scripture.
universe itself had
He
silenced
walked
the
again
melody.
back under lights.
Randy's death
this time
didn't just
carrying
break
the
Ozzy,
hush of
it
hospitals
hollowed
with
him.
him.
And though
The
time
scars
would
that did
force him
not
to
show
keep
began
walking,
to speak daily.
a part of his soul
Pain
forever
became a
remained in
companion
that burning
that never
wreck.
ran late.
On that
He
unforgiving
woke
morning in
inside
March,
it and still counted
Ozzy
the breath
watched in
as a
horror
victory.
as a small plane
Comment
carrying
76,
Randy exploded
or
in a
right,
fireball
rip
before his
Ozzy
eyes.
Osbourne to
In
honor
that
them.
instant, a piece of Ozzy
Years
died
later,
too.
another fall
For weeks,
turned back
he
the
vanished
pages
into
to
silence,
older injuries.
unable to speak,
Metal
unwilling to
placed
eat,
to fix
drowning
what the
himself
crash
in
had
alcohol
broken,
just to
shifted
numb the
again,
loss.
summoning
He later
a
said,
new chapter of
"Losing
agony.
Randy was like losing a part
Then
of my
came
soul.
the diagnosis that
I didn't
gave
want
a
to
name
live.
to the thief
I didn't
that
want to
had been
play
slowly
music.
emptying his
I didn't
steps.
want anything."
Parkinson's
It wasn't
disease.
just grief. It
For
was
someone
emotional
whose body
paralysis.
had once prowled stages
Sharon,
like a storm,
once his lifeline,
the tremor
struggled
felt
to
like
reach
a
him.
robbery.
Even she
He
admitted,
admitted his balance
"I
had
thought I'd
become
lost
a
him forever."
negotiation. He spoke
from the
plainly
wreckage of
about
that
wobbling
despair,
where he used
something
to stride.
unexplainable began to
He
stir.
kept making music
Ozzy
anyway.
began to write again.
In 2020,
to move
he
on,
sent out a record
to
that
remember.
sounded like
Every
daylight
lyric,
breaking through
every
hospital
scream
blinds
into the
grief
mic
in its
became a
fibers.
tribute to the friend he would never
Defiance in
forget.
its bones.
Though the pain would
The
never
years that
fade,
followed
Ozzy
were
knew he
measured
had
by
to carry the
surgeries,
music forward,
cancellations,
not just for the
and quiet
fans,
interviews
not even for himself,
where humor still
but for
flashed
Randy.
like a lighter in the
His
dark.
survival became a form
He
of
said
defiance.
more than once that
and every
he wasn't
show
ready
that followed
to hang
carried
up
the
the
weight
mic.
of a legacy built in
And
tragedy.
that was everything he had
He wasn't
taught the
healed,
world by living.
but he was moving.
You can be broken
And for
and
Ozzy
still be louder
Osbourne,
than you're
that
breaking.
meant he was still alive.
Comment 76.
You'd think the worst
or
was
right
behind
rip
him,
Ozzy Osbourne
that
to
surviving
honor
the
them.
unthinkable
A return
would
home
teach the
closed
soul
a
how
circle.
to heal.
On
But grief
July 5th,
doesn't follow logic.
2025,
And for
he
Ozzy
stood cane
Osbourne,
in hand.
the years after
His
Randy
partner
Rhoads'
beside
death
him,
weren't about
the city
recovery.
that raised him with
They
the
were
band
about
that had
descent
first taught him how to
into
roar.
a private,
The world
relentless
watched
darkness darkness
as if
that
attending
clawed
a
at him
benediction.
day after day, until
The voice
even
was
music
older,
His
The
one
hands were
salvation
unsteady,
couldn't
but
drown
as
the
the first
silence.
notes rose,
The
time
1980s blurred
shrugged
by in
and
a
opened.
storm of noise and
He
numbness.
whispered that this might
Each
be the
tour
last
felt like a
time he
war
stood
zone.
under a stage's
Each
sky,
hotel room, a
and
shattered
collective
mirror of
heart
who he used to
learned
be.
what it feels like to
On
break
stage,
and be
the
grateful
world saw
at
a
once.
madman with smeared eyeliner
curtain didn't
and a mythic
crash.
persona. But
It
backstage,
drifted down like
Ozzy was
sunset.
fading. Volatile,
In an act
unreachable,
truer than any
barely holding
encore.
on.
Every
Sharon,
dollar
his
from that
anchor,
night
tried
moved outward
everything.
to help the fight
She had saved
against
him once
Parkinson.
and refused to walk away.
Care for children
But
who
even
need
her love
miracles
couldn't
more
always
than
pierce the
headlines.
fog he carried inside.
Even in narrowing
As
corridors
Ozzy
of
would
help,
later admit,
he
with a
converted
voice barely
spotlight
above a whisper,
into service.
I wasn't even
In the
my
weeks
own
that
life.
followed,
I was just
microphones were swapped
gone.
for conversations
By
in gardens
1987,
and studio
alcohol
rooms
had swallowed
where
him
sound
whole.
was memory
Pills
and memory
blurred
was
every
company.
line. Between
He
memory
spoke
and
plainly
illusion,
about
between
endings
waking and
without
escape.
fear.
Then
Made
came
jokes
August
because that was
1989,
still part of him,
a night that
and
wasn't
let the
born
quiet
from
have its
rage,
place.
but from total collapse.
On July
A
22nd,
night when Ozzy,
2025,
lost within
the
himself,
quiet
did
took all
something
the
so
room,
devastating.
and yet
It
the
shook
echo
the foundation
he leaves
of
keeps
everything
walking.
he loved.
Comment
In a haze
76
he barely remembers,
or write,
he
rip
came
Ozzy
dangerously
Osbourne
close to
honor
destroying
them.
the one person who had given him everything. Sharon.
The name that began
wasn't
as
me,
John Michael
he later
and
confessed.
became Ozzy
It felt like I
is
was
more
watching
than
someone
a
else
stage
do
whisper
it.
carried by
When I woke up
amplifiers.
and realized
It is a map
what had
of
happened.
survival cut into the
broke.
grain of a life.
I didn't want to exist
You
anymore.
can trace it with your finger.
That night,
The
he was
boy
taken
who
away,
mistook silence
confused,
for safety.
hollow-eyed,
The
unable
teenager
to comprehend
who
the
believed
weight
the
of what had
world
happened.
had no place for him.
Sharon, with more
The
pain than
young
anger,
man who
later
learned to
shared,
carve a place anyway
I didn't know
by
whether to
turning
press
fear into
charges
sound.
or call for help.
When he sang,
just knew
the notes were
something
not
had to change.
decorations.
For both of us.
They were shelters
And so,
he built overnight.
Ozzy was sent
again
not just to
and
rehab,
again,
but
against
to a place
storms that
where the
returned
damage could
without
finally
warning.
be confronted.
Even in
The
the
public
late
never
stillness
saw
of
the
his
details.
life,
But
the
behind
slow
those
mornings
walls,
with
without
careful
cameras,
steps,
without
the
applause,
afternoons measured
Ozzy
by
sat alone
medication,
and faced the wreckage of
the
the man
evenings
he'd become.
softened by the hum
The man
of an
his
old
children
studio.
no longer
He
recognized.
kept choosing to
The
be
man he
present
didn't
in
either.
the simplest,
There were no
bravest way.
costumes, no
He
guitars,
kept looking up.
only silence.
The body
A
betrayed.
counselor once asked
The
him,
will refused
"What do
to
you fear
co-sign."
most?" And without
he knew
hesitation,
the cost of every
Ozzy
breath
replied,
and paid
that
it
she'll
with
walk away,
gratitude that sounded
I've
like
finally
a growl
pushed her
shaped
too far.
into a thank you.
But Sharon didn't
He met
leave.
the narrowing of
Instead,
his days
she came
not
to
with
him,
denial,
eyes tired
with
but full
the
of fire,
craftsman's attention.
and said, "You are
If he
still
could
in
no
there.
longer
I
outrun
know
pain, he could
It
still
wasn't
outwork
forgiveness.
despair.
It was war."
He took his
Every
time
day
with
in
small
that center,
things a chair
Ozzy
by the
fought,
garden window.
not for fame,
A
not even for
familiar
redemption,
melody turning
but
slow
for the right
circles
to
in
keep
his
the love he
headphones.
nearly lost.
A joke
The
that
battle
landed
was
like
brutal.
a bright coin in
He
a
didn't
silent
walk out
room,
healed,
and
but he
those
walked
small
out
things
changed,
took their time with
thinner,
him.
quieter,
Each one said,
haunted,
"You are still
but
here."
also aware,
and he
finally,
believed
of
them,
how far he had
at least
fallen
enough to reach
and how
the
precious
next
it
one.
was to rise.
Comment 76,
Years later, in his
or
own
write,
words,
rip Ozzy
he would say,
Osbourne to honor
That
them.
was when I
The child
realized
named John Michael,
I couldn't keep falling
who
and
learned
pretend it was
early that
flying.
letters could twist
I had to
into
choose to live.
enemies. Never
After
stopped
the storm
listening
came
for another
not
language
peace,
he could trust.
but a silence so heavy
Rhythm
it
accepted
pressed down
him where
like grief
grammar
itself.
would not.
A silence
Pitch
not
held
of calm,
him steady when
but of
rules
vacancy.
would not.
Ozzy
The drone of
Osbourne,
factory
stripped of
life
bravado,
around.
stripped
His
of
family
performance,
tuned his
stood
ear
at
to
the edge of the
machines
life
and
he'd
thunder
wrecked,
and the strange
uncertain
comfort
whether
of
the man he
repeating
once
patterns.
was still
In
existed
that sense,
beneath the debris.
music didn't arrive
In
as a miracle.
1989, after the
It was
harrowing
there
night
all
when he
along,
nearly lost himself
hiding in the
to the
clatter
darkest
of
version of
dishes,
who he had
the
become,
pulse of train
when the
wheels,
woman who had saved
heavy
him became a
breathing
victim
of
of
city
his
nights.
unraveling, Ozzy was
He learned
arrested
to
and
translate
sent
the
not to
world
prison,
through volume and
but to
timing.
a psychiatric
The
facility.
way a slammed door
It wasn't
could be a snare
condemnation.
hit.
It was
The
his
way
final
a shouted
reprieve.
insult,
Inside
if held
those
long
walls,
enough,
there was no
turned
music,
into a sustained
no lights,
note that could be
no
bent
screaming
toward
crowds.
triumph.
there was only
That
a
is
man,
how a boy with a
hollowed
rope
by
in his
guilt and
hands
drenched
grew
in
up
shame,
into a man with
who
a
barely
microphone.
spoke for weeks.
Because both
The
are
iconic
instruments for
voice of
making
heavy
an
metal
ending
had become a
happen on
whisper
your
in a
own
dim
terms.
hallway of recovery.
The difference,
echoing
the
only
sacred,
with
fragile
regret.
differences that the
But
second
outside
one
those
lets you
walls,
bring other people
Sharon
with
waited.
you.
She returned, not out of obligation,
or write Rip
but
Ozzy
defiance.
Osbourne to honor
She
them.
saw what others
He
could
met
not.
3 men
The
who
flicker
taught the
of the
thunder
man
to
buried
speak.
beneath the wreckage.
Tony Iommi,
There
a
was still a
guitarist who
spark in him,
fashioned new
she later
endpoints
said,
for nerve
buried
endings,
deep
showed that
but I knew it
limitation
was
can
there.
be a forge, not a
And
wall.
within the sterile halls
The
of that
sound
recovery
he coaxed
center,
from altered
Ozzy
hands
began to
became a
fight.
geography
Not an
for
audience,
others to travel.
not critics, but the
Low-tuned
monsters that
cathedrals
lived
where
inside
doom
his
was not the
chest.
final word.
The detox
just the
process
starting
tore
key.
through him like wildfire,
Iron-bright pathways
burning away
that
not
caught
just
grief
toxins,
and returned
but
it shaped,
illusions.
formidable.
Every memory, every
With
wrong,
Tony,
every
heaviness
scar
wasn't
was
a
forced to
burden.
the surface.
It was
It
an
wasn't
architecture
healing.
strong
It was
enough
war.
to carry memories
But with
weight.
trembling steps and raw
Their
conviction,
exchanges,
he
rifts
clawed his
answered
way
by a
forward.
human siren's
Not
wail,
cured,
were
but
not
conscious.
arguments, but
And in
agreements.
1990, he
You
did
hold
the
the ground,
unthinkable.
all split the sky.
He returned to music,
And while
not
the
with the
world
fury
would
of
parse
his youth,
who invented
but
what,
with something
they
more
knew
dangerous.
the truth needed no
clarity.
courtroom. The
Reuniting
origin was
with Zakk
pain
Wylde,
refusing to
the
die
two began
quietly.
crafting what would become
And the method
No
was
More
work done
Tears,
until the
an
work
album
started
not
working
born from
back.
chaos,
Right,
but from
ripped
survival.
Tony Iommi to
Released
honor
in 1991,
Beside that
it was
steelwork
more than a comeback.
stood a philosopher
It was a
with
reckoning.
a bass in his hand.
Tracks like Mama,
Geezer
I'm Coming
Butler
Home,
turned thought
and
into
Road to
atmosphere,
Nowhere weren't
a
just
line
radio hits.
into an omen.
They were confessions
He could
carved
make
from
a
the
single
marrow of
note
a broken
feel
man
like a
trying to
horizon
rebuild.
you had to cross before
It was the
chorus
sound of
arrived.
me trying to be human
And
again.
in his company, the
Ozzy
songs
later
learned
admitted,
to breathe
his voice
darker
soft,
air without
but sure.
suffocating.
The world
His
listened.
lyrics and low
Fans
end
who once
together
feared
were
his
a
silence
kind of
was
weather.
final now
The
watched
sense
him
that
rise.
storms can be
Not
warnings
as the
or
myth,
baptisms,
but as the
depending
man.
on where you stand.
Yet off stage, the battle
He
raged
taught
on.
the music to
Each
think
show was a
without
victory.
losing its body.
Each sober morning
taught
a miracle.
the how to carry
Sharon
words that
remained
mattered.
not as a savior now,
When Ozzy
but as a
sang
soldier
over those
beside him,
foundations,
fighting
it
with
wasn't
him,
decoration.
not for him.
It was
I
lifting
owe
the
her
roof
everything.
off a thought, so
Ozzy
the night
confessed,
could look in.
She saved my life
Right,
not
ripped
once,
Geezer
but
Butler
every
to honor
single
them.
day.
And thunder
Their
needs
marriage,
a clock that
once
can argue
trembling
with it
under the weight
and
of
still
madness,
keep time.
evolved into a
Bill
testament
Ward
of
set down the
endurance,
mathematics
flawed
of chaos,
but unbroken.
patterns that felt
During
like
the early
prophecy.
1990s, Ozzy
Fills
threw
that
himself
crashed
into
through
work,
and
as
still
if
caught
afraid
you
to stop
as
moving.
They landed.
He toured
He
relentlessly,
understood that percussion
released more
is not
music,
only
and even
impact,
announced a
but
farewell
mercy, the
tour
tiny
in
gaps
1992.
That let breath in after
But,
the hit.
true to his nature,
On stage,
he returned
he made the air
again
visible.
and again.
In the studio,
Because though
he left
he'd
Ghost for
survived,
headphones to find.
the pain hadn't vanished.
Together, these
It
three
haunted
made
him
a
in
kind
quiet
of temple
moments,
in which a
whispered
voice
through
like
his
Ozzy's
lyrics,
could go to
settled
be
behind
remade
his
in that
eyes,
voice.
and the audience
In turn,
felt it.
made the temple
Because when
echo.
Ozzy took the stage and
Right,
howled
ripped
into
Bill
the dark,
Ward to
it
honor
wasn't
them,
for spectacle.
Sharon
It was
stepped
survival
into the
made
wreckage,
sound.
as if it were
It was a
room
man
that could be
screaming,
made
not just to
livable
be
with
heard,
enough patience
but to
and
stay
light.
alive.
She did
Years
not
later,
come with
reflecting
potions
on
or
those
speeches.
days, he said,
She came with
I
a
never
plan.
thought I'd live this long.
In a life
Every
where
day
so
is
much
borrowed
had arrived,
time,
either as
and I'm just
accident
trying
or
to make
ambush,
it count.
She brought
For those who
intention.
knew the full weight
Where
of what
others
he'd
saw a
endured,
story ending,
the cell walls,
she opened a
the
new
near
chapter
losses,
and insisted
madness
it be
and
written
mercy.
in complete sentences.
It wasn't just a comeback.
With her, the
It was
days
a
regained
resurrection.
calendars.
The Prince of Darkness
nights
had looked
acquired
into the
rest.
abyss, and instead
She
of
was not a
surrendering,
rescuer
he clawed
standing
his way
above a
back,
flood with a
bruised, bleeding,
She
but
climbed into
breathing.
the water and swam
though the
beside
wounds
him
never
until
truly
the shore
healed,
was real
He
again.
wore them as proof.
There were seasons when love
Proof
had to
that
disguise
survival
itself
is
as
not
logistics appointments.
It's
kept.
a choice you make in the
Contracts
depths of
clarified.
despair.
Schedules
again,
that kept relapse
every
from finding
day
a foothold,
after.
and she wore that disguise
Just when the
as
storm
armor.
seemed to have calmed,
When the world
Ozzy
insisted
Osbourne
on
had
myth,
clawed his
she
way
built
toward
a
a
home.
fragile peace,
When
built
he
on
said
broken
he feared
memories
losing her
and
more than
hard-won
anything,
redemption,
she
fate
answered
delivered
by staying
another
with
blow,
a fierceness that
one
never
that came
pretended
not from
forgiveness
scandal or
was easy.
substance, but from
It
something
wasn't
far
softness
more
that
brutal.
saved him.
The body,
It was
finally
steel,
reckoning with the
polished
years
bright
it had
by
endured.
endurance.
The early
Right ripped
2000s
Sharon
should have
Osbourne
been
to
a
honor
golden
them.
era.
Randy
His
Rhoads
music
did
was
not
being
simply
rediscovered
arrive.
by a new generation.
He appeared,
and
the way
the
a star
Osbournes,
seems to
a
switch on
chaotic,
in a sky you've been
unscripted look
staring
into
at
his home
in
life,
prayer.
turned him from
Precision
metal
without
legend
coldness.
into a lovable
Fire
cultural
without
icon.
recklessness. His guitar
Gone
work
was
made
the
a case
distant
for
Prince
beauty
of Darkness,
in a realm that had
now
often
replaced
deferred
by
to
a
brute
confused
force.
but oddly endearing father
He taught a
who
singer
fumbled
who had
with
always
TV
trusted
remotes
instinct
and wandered
that
through his
discipline
kitchen
could
in
also
mismatched
be a
clothes.
kind of freedom.
The show debuted in 2002 and exploded in popularity, making Ozzy a household name in homes that had never even heard a single Black Sabbath riff. But behind the surreal domestic fame was a man still walking a tightrope. In his 50s
moving
now,
fast enough to
Ozzy
catch
bore
a
the
dream
weight of a lifetime
without
lived on the
falling
edge.
through it.
His joints
That
stiff,
is why the loss
reflexes
felt like physics
slow,
breaking.
and health becoming
When the plane
increasingly
fell
unpredictable.
and the fire rose,
Then,
it was
on
not
December
only a
8,
musician's
2003, the
it
thread
was the
snapped.
sudden ending of
A casual
sentence
ride
that had
across
been
his
teaching
estate
the
on a
world
quad
a
bike
new
turned
grammar
catastrophic
for joy.
when he lost control
Comment
of the vehicle,
25
which
for
flipped
Right Rip
and slammed
Randy.
him violently
Roads
into
to
the
honor
earth.
them.
The impact
Rachel
shattered his
Youngblood
collarbone,
boarded that same
broke
flight
multiple
with the
ribs,
gentle bravery
crushed a
of
vertebra
someone
in his neck,
doing a
and
small
collapsed
thing
his
on an
lungs.
ordinary morning.
He stopped breathing.
In
He
stories
was
like
rushed
this,
to the hospital,
history acts
placed
as
on a
if the
ventilator,
spotlight can
and for
only
8
hold
days,
one name
Ozzy
at a
Osbourne
time.
hovered in a
But
coma,
grief doesn't choose.
silent, still,
It takes
and
all that is
terrifyingly
within
vulnerable.
reach.
Sharon later
She,
recalled,
too, became
"I thought
part
I was
of
going
the
to lose
absence
him.
that day.
I was
A
bracing
human
for goodbye."
being with a craft
Around
and
the
a kindness
world, fans
now
held their
folded
breath.
into memory.
After surviving so
In
much
the hours
for so long,
after,
was
amid
this finally the
sirens and
moment when the
ash and
curtain would
shock,
fall?
any attempt
But
to
Ozzy,
narrate
once
what
again,
happened felt
defied
like betrayal.
expectation.
Some
He
events
emerged,
do not require
blinking
language.
against the hospital lights,
They require
whispering
witness.
words no one thought they'd
To
hear
say
again.
her name is to remember
Doctors
that
warned it
every
would take months,
catastrophe has
possibly
more than
years,
one center.
for him to walk
Right,
again,
Rip Rachel
to regain
Youngblood
strength,
to honor
to
them.
even breathe freely.
After the funeral moon,
Ozzy had
work
spent his
became
entire
both
life
shield
doing
and
the impossible.
confession.
Through pain
In
so
studio
sharp it
nights
left
that
him
stretched
gasping,
thin,
and
Ozzy
rehab
sang
that
not to
demanded
prove
everything
he was
of
still
him,
the same,
he began to
but to
rebuild.
acknowledge he could
Each
never
small
be.
step was a victory.
The difference
Each
matters.
breath, a testament.
Nostalgia courts
And in
ghosts.
2004,
Truth
just
courts
months later,
tomorrow.
he walked onto the stage at
chose
the
the
Brighty
second
Awards
as often
to
as he could.
thunderous applause.
He
Not
surrounded
just from
himself
fans,
with
but
players
from a
who
world
understood
that had
that their
watched him
job
tumble
was
and
not to
rise
recreate
again
the past,
and again.
but to argue for
Still,
a future.
the accident left
That
behind
is where a
scars no
guitarist with a
X-ray could
bull's heart
detect.
vibrato stepped
Chronic pain
in.
became a
Zakk Wylde,
constant whisper.
a presence
Some days,
equal parts
even
oak
moving
and
was a
lightning,
mountain.
took up the post,
I wake up,
not as a
and it hurts,
replacement, but
Ozzy
as a
admitted.
witness to
But
continuity.
I'm still breathing. That's
The
enough.
riffs thickened into
It's
rope.
this quiet,
The
weary
solos
resilience,
rose like beacons.
less a roar now and
What
more
they
a
built
low,
together
stubborn
wasn't a
growl
shrine.
that defines
It was a
Ozzy's
bridge.
later years.
And
His
across
strength
that
doesn't
bridge,
come from loud
night
guitars
after
or
night,
pyrotechnics.
people carried
It comes
their
from
own
refusing to
brokenness
stop,
toward a noise
even
big
when
enough
everything
to hold
hurts.
it.
From daring
Right,
to
Rip
rise
Zakk
again
Wylde to honor
when staying
them.
down would be easier. He had turned survival
In the
into
quiet
an art
corners
and
where
pain
contracts
into
are
poetry.
filed and holidays
And as
are
he stepped back
negotiated,
into the spotlight,
another
slower
name
but
remains
unbowed,
etched, Thelma
one
Riley,
thing became clear.
the first partner
Some
in a
legends
life that
don't
had
burn
not
out.
yet learned how to
They
mark
outlast
time
the
without
fire.
chaos.
Just
Public
when
memory
Ozzy
prefers
Osbourne believed
tidy
he had
arcs.
endured every
Real
torment life
lives
could inflict,
refuse them.
when the storms
The
seemed
years
to have
they
passed
shared contained
and the scars had
beginnings
finally
that never
settled
made
into
the
silence,
documentaries.
the year
Small
2019
meals eaten
descended
between shifts.
with a merciless cruelty
Arguments that
that
taught
eclipsed
limits.
even his darkest
Laughter
days.
so brief, it
There were no
almost
flashing
escaped
lights
notice,
this time,
but did not.
no thunderous
The
crowds to
family
drown
they
out the
made
fear,
from that early
just a
chapter
quiet
would
day at
carry
home
forward even
and a
as
single
paths
misstep
diverged.
that changed everything.
None of it is reducible
One
to
fall,
courtroom
seemingly
words
minor,
like failure
became a
or
catastrophe.
success.
The very metal
Sometimes a
rods that had
foundation
been
is
fused
not
into
the
his
house you
spine
end up
after the
living in.
near-fatal quad bike crash in
Sometimes it is the floor
2003
you learn to
were
stand
dislodged
on
in
before
an
you
instant.
find which direction
It was
to
as
walk.
if the past had returned,
Right, Rip Thelma
not with
Riley
memories,
to honor them.
but with vengeance,
From that foundation
ripping open
grew
wounds
branches
both
with
physical
their own
and
leaves
emotional,
and fruit.
dragging him
Amy
back
Osbourne,
into a kind of
choosing
agony
quiet over
that defied
spectacle,
description.
changed her last
Ozzy
name
later
into a
whispered in
lantern
an interview,
she held at
voice
arm's
barely
length,
steady, that it was
exploring corridors
pain
of sound
beyond
that
anything
suited
I've
shadow
ever
better
felt.
than glare.
A statement
To decline a
chilling in its
camera
weight,
when the
coming
world
from
is
a man
offering
who had
20
already
is
endured a
form
lifetime of
courage
torment.
not usually
The
celebrated.
fall was not the end.
She practiced
It was only the
anyway,
beginning of
building
a new,
songs as
cruel
rooms where
chapter.
listeners could enter
Not
without
long after,
being watched.
doctors delivered a
That
second,
choice spoke to the
soul-crushing
same
blow,
truth her
a
father had
diagnosis
lived
of
from a
Parkinson's
different angle.
disease. A silent,
Survival
relentless
sometimes
enemy
means
that didn't
finding
strike
the
all
right
at once,
size of
but
spotlight.
eroded, slowly,
Right, Rip
cruelly,
Amy Osbourne
the very
to honor
core
them.
of what it meant
Kelly.
to move.
Osbourne
tall,
stepped toward the
to be
noise
free.
with a
For
posture
Ozzy,
that turned
who had once
irreverence
commanded the
into a
stage
kind
with
of grace.
uncontainable energy and
She
fire.
took the world's
It
habit
felt
of
like the theft of his
classification
identity.
and answered with
The
plurality.
tremors began.
Singer,
His
designer,
balance faltered.
presence,
And then
commentator,
came the public
a voice
confession,
that could be
raw
playful or
and
flint hard.
unfiltered.
depending on what the
I
moment
can't walk
asked.
properly these days. I'm
She
just
learned
wobbling.
to take the last
No
name
masks,
that once
no
threatened
rock
to
star
swallow
persona.
identity
Just a
and
man
reshape
stripped
it
down
into
to
a
truth.
platform that could
His
be
words
shared.
carried not just honesty,
In public,
but
she
heartbreak.
kept the barbed humor
This wasn't
that
simply
makes
a
honesty
diagnosis.
survivable.
It was a reckoning.
In private,
The world that
she
once
guarded
watched him
family
defy
in
death
ways
now
only
saw him
those
face
inside the
something more
storm can
intimate.
understand.
Time
Enough
itself.
distance to breathe.
These past few
Enough
years have been sheer
closeness to
misery,
help.
he said, in his
Right
final
Rip
years.
Kelly
The
Osbourne
words
to honor
heavy with
them.
fatigue and sorrow.
Jack Osbourne grew
pain,
from youngest into
fear,
steward,
the sense of losing
trading
control.
adolescent chaos
It
for the
wasn't
steady
theatrical.
logistics of
It was
adulthood.
real.
He carried
Sharon stood
cameras
beside him,
into places
just as
where
she
mystery
always had.
lives.
But even
Then
her unwavering
returned with
devotion
stories
couldn't
that
stop the
treated
quiet
the
advance
unknown
of
with
the illness
respect
that
rather
slowly,
than sensation.
mercilessly
More
changed the man
importantly,
she loved.
he became a
And
hand
through it
at
all,
the small of a
Ozzy
father's
battled
back
not
when
only his
hospital
body,
hallways
but
grew
his
long.
guilt. He
A
had
second
hidden the
set
truth
of
from
eyes
fans
on
for a time,
decisions.
worried not
A
for
pair
his
of
image,
shoulders
but
under
for
a
their
weight
hearts.
no one should have to lift
He didn't
alone.
want to disappoint the very
If
people who had
legacy
given
is
him
more
strength
than
across
applause,
decades.
it looks like this.
But when the truth came out,
Paperwork,
the world
read carefully.
didn't recoil. It reached back.
Appointments kept.
Fans
A
rallied.
laugh shared
They
in
saw
waiting
not
rooms.
weakness, but
The
incredible strength in
insistence
the man
that
who
fatigue
dared to
will
bear
not
his
have
suffering.
the last word today.
And still, despite the
Right,
chaos
Rip
in his
Jack
bones,
Osbourne to honor
the
them.
tremble in his voice, he
From
created.
that earlier chapter with
In
Thelma
2020,
came Jessica
he released
and Lewis.
Ordinary Man,
Names most of the
an
world
album
never
haunted by
chased.
pain.
And that
Yes,
is exactly the
but
point.
also filled with
They
something
protected
radiant.
their privacy the
defiance.
way some protect a
It wasn't
home
just
by
music.
making sure the
It was a
address is
statement
never
carved
published.
in grief and grit,
It does
saying,
not mean they were
I'm
absent.
still here.
There are photographs.
I still have something to
if
say.
You know where to look. Moments
Ozzy Osbourne's
in which
fight
the
was
edges
never just
soften
for music.
And a public figure
It was for
becomes
meaning,
simply a man
for the right
standing,
to keep going
with his children
when everything
as time
screamed
leans its
to stop.
head on all their shoulders
Every
at
step he
once.
took, now with canes
Silence
and aching
is
joints,
not emptiness.
was a rebellion.
It is agency.
Every note he sang,
Right,
a
Rip
protest.
Jessica Osbourne to
And
honor
though there
them.
were surgeries,
Louis Osbourne
endless hospital
followed a
stays,
similar path
and
into a
moments
life
where
measured
even
by
he
choices
admitted
made
he
far
wasn't
from
sure he'd stand
microphones.
again, he never
Not
surrendered.
everyone born near a stage
I'm not
wants
ready
to
to
live
hang
there.
up my mic yet,
And not
he
everyone
declared
born
at the time.
in a shadow feels
And in that
compelled to
sentence
step
was
out.
everything.
To make
Fire,
a private
memory,
orbit when gravity insists
That's
on
what made his
spectacle
story
is
so
a discipline
achingly
worthy
powerful.
of its own
Not
applause.
the fame, not the legacy,
In every
but the way
family,
he rose
there are those
again
who
and
hold
again,
the door against
even
the
when
wind
every
so
part of
others can
him
pass
had reason
through.
not to.
That work
In the
rarely
final stretch of
trends,
his life,
and yet
Ozzy
houses
Osbourne,
fall without
worn
it.
by time but never
Right,
erased
Rip
by it,
Louis Osbourne
reminded the
to
world
honor
of
them.
one final truth.
With the family
True
came
legends
a
don't
village
vanish
of
quietly.
caretakers,
They leave
technicians,
echoes.
friends,
And now,
crew
though the
members
lights have
who
faded,
learned his rhythms
that
the way
echo,
sailors
raw,
learn a sea.
imperfect, human,
The good days when
keeps
jokes
on
were
roaring.
currency and projects moved.
At 76, the
bad
darkness that
days
once
when
surrounded
pain
Ozzy
narrowed the
Osbourne
horizon,
no longer
and
came from
quiet was the
pyrotechnics
only
or
safe
stage lights.
language.
It came from something
They kept
quieter,
secrets the way
colder,
medics keep
and
blood
far more
inside
relentless.
a body.
Time.
Firm hands,
In his final
gentle
years,
eyes,
his battle
an
with
oath
Parkinson's
understood
disease had
rather than
intensified,
spoken.
reshaping
The
every
stage may
corner of
name
his
a
life.
single star,
The once
but the light
unshakable
requires
Prince
an
of
entire
Darkness
sky.
woke to hands
And
that
this sky
trembled
never
without
stopped
warning,
arranging itself
legs that
around
faltered
him.
beneath him,
In the end
and a
game,
voice that had
their
once
work
shattered
grew even more
stadiums,
sacred.
now reduced to a
Ramps
fragile echo.
replaced stairs.
Each day began with
Railings
uncertainty.
refused to let gravity
On
win
some
cheap.
mornings, he stared into
Chairs
the
were
mirror
placed
and didn't
exactly
quite
where a
recognize
step
the man
would
looking
feel
back.
too far.
But even in that
The
frailty,
miracle wasn't that
he
he walked
refused
back
to
onto a
surrender.
stage.
There are
The
days I
miracle
wake
was
up
that
and don't
day
recognize
after day,
myself.
He
once
chose
said,
to walk anywhere
but I'm still
at all.
fighting. I'm not
Comment
done yet.
76. Or right
His
Rip
world had
Ozzy
narrowed,
Osbourne to honor
less
them.
about arenas
He kept
and
promises,
more about survival.
even as the calendar shortened.
Daily therapy sessions,
A final
carefully timed
hometown performance
medications,
became
physical
less a
support
concert
systems,
than a communal
and
oath.
round-the-clock care came to
He
define
arrived
the rhythm
not to
of
prove
his
stamina,
days.
but to witness it.
Sharon, the woman who had
strength of a
stood by
city
him
that
through
had
every
once cradled
collapse
and bruised
every
him.
resurrection,
The strength
remained
of a
at
band
his side.
whose early shadows
Not just
stretched
a
out
partner,
to touch the
but his
present.
pillar of strength.
The strength of people
Their home in
who had
Buckinghamshire
brought their
was no
younger
longer
selves
just
in
a
their
home.
pockets to
It
hear
became
what
a
survival
sanctuary,
sounded like
adapted
now.
to meet the needs of a
When
man
he said
who
this
once
might be
roared
the
across across stages, but now moved with quiet caution. Railings lined the
benediction
hallways,
permission to let
ramps
go,
replaced
for
stairs,
him and for
every
us.
corner whispered of
The
adaptation.
generosity that sent every
And yet,
dollar outward
within those
also
walls,
sent a message
Ozzy
inward.
still chased
The
fragments
music
of
had
who
always
he had
been
been.
for something
On better
larger
days,
than the
he would
person
sit in the
singing.
garden, headphones
He
on,
had been saved
listening
by
to the
sound.
riffs that had built his
Now
world.
he let sound
Sometimes
save others.
he stepped into his home
Comment
studio,
76,
not to
or
record
right
for fans,
Ozzy Osbourne
but to remember the
honor
man
them
who had once
in the
lived
final
inside the
rooms
music.
of his life.
Though his body grew weaker,
He set
his mind
affairs
remained
with the diligence
sharp.
of someone
He
who
still
had learned
joked,
the hard way
still
that
cursed,
chaos can
still
steal
surprised
anything left
interviewers with
unattended.
flashes of dark humor
Papers
and
were
profound
arranged,
honesty.
not as
When he spoke of
monuments
death,
to wealth,
it was
but as
without
instruments tuned to care.
It's just the next tour,
for the woman
he
who
once
kept
said.
the boat upright
But without the sound
in 10
check,
different oceans.
that was Ozzy,
For the children who
irreverent,
became their
defiant,
own weather systems.
even in decline.
For the
But beneath the
grandchildren
bravado
who would carry
lay a
stories
quiet
forward
acceptance.
like seeds.
He had cancelled all
For
remaining
strangers
shows.
who would one day
the stage
step
was
into
behind
clinics
him.
they couldn't
And yet,
otherwise afford
in true Osbourne
and come
fashion,
back out with
he
a fighting
refused
chance.
to let that be the final note.
Even the animals
Instead,
he loved were
he
written
crafted
into
his
the
farewell
margins,
with grace
a
and
soft
grit,
chorus in a
a
document
quiet
of
exit
steel.
for a man whose life had
None
been
of this
anything
felt
but.
like a celebrity checklist.
His legacy, now
It
etched in
felt like
pain and
craft another
perseverance,
song assembled
continues to
from the raw
resonate
material
louder than
of
any
hard-won
encore.
clarity.
Ozzy no
Comment
longer
76,
performs,
or right
but in that
rip
final
Ozzy
stretch of
Osbourne
life,
to honor them.
in each breath,
When people
each
say
memory,
icon,
each
they
whispered
often
lyric,
mean image.
he proved one
But his
final
truest
truth.
imprint lives
Legends
in the less
don't
photogenic
die
places.
with the music.
The decision
They
at
live
4
on
in the
in the
afternoon
silence that
not
follows.
to drink. The patience to
On July
relearn
5th,
steps that used to belong
2025,
to instinct.
something happened that felt
The
less
open
like a
admission
concert
in
and more
public
like a closing
that fear
prayer
still
for a
visits,
generation.
and that bravery
Ozzy
is what
Osbourne,
you do while it's
flanked
in
by the
room.
original members of Black Sabbath,
taught audiences
returned to the
that
very soil
performance
that
is
gave
not a
birth to the
mask.
legend, Birmingham.
Sometimes it is an
They called it
exhale at the
Back
edge
to the
of
beginning.
panic.
But what
He taught
unfolded
other
felt
artists
more like
that
the
a career
edge of an
is
ending.
not a staircase,
Over
but a
40,000
cliffly
fans
eroded,
packed the arena,
rebuilt,
while nearly 6
reimagined
million
by
more
every
watched
storm
from
man.
across the
That
world.
staying is a
The
form
moment
of
Ozzy
talent
appeared,
on its own.
slowly,
He
leaning on a
taught
cane
anyone
with
who
Sharon
listened
by his
that
side,
the boy who once
crowd
tied a
fell
rope
silent.
could grow into a
Not
man
out
who
of
ties
restraint,
communities
but
together with
reverence.
chords.
It wasn't just a
Comment
performance.
76,
It
or
was a
right rip
farewell
Ozzy
forged in
Osbourne
tremors,
to honor them.
both physical and emotional.